and we'll start. Let's go. 3, 2, 1. I'm out here with Matthew Stanley. Where are we?
Arnold, California, a little up Highway 4, Sierra Nevada range.
And keeping with this program of doing IRL readings while touring the country, I said, well, why don't we go early morning and do it? But we decided to take it to another level here and see if we can do it while hiking. So I was with Nansen Wukas back in the day in Poland, and we did a hike. But we stopped and read along the hike. So what we're going to see, what we're going to see is if we can kind of have the best of both worlds, you know? So, and what I think we'll be doing is basically just taking turns, as we did in the first episode of this series of us reading the history of the concept of time. And so if you want to go see the introduction, it's already available. This chapter deals with basically the history of recent philosophy and philosophy of science up until the time that he is teaching. And so, what is the title of that section?
Chapter 1, Emergence and Initial Breakthrough of Phenomenological Research.
Oh, snap. Actually, no, it's go back one.
Oh, I'm on the wrong...
Yeah, let's double check. Hold on. Wait.
Yeah, we finished.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Okay,
So,
what's the name of the actual chapter?
That's what chapter 1 is called. Do you want the paragraph, like the section?
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Section?
Yeah, the section.
Here, yeah.
Yeah.
The situation of philosophy in the second half of the 19th century. Philosophy and the sciences.
There we go. Yeah, take it away.
All right. We must first get a clear sense of the history of phenomenological research as it emerged from the historical situation of philosophy in the last decades of the 19th century. This situation, in turn, is determined by the transformation of the scientific consciousness in the 19th century, which took place after the collapse of the idealistic systems, a transformation which affects not only philosophy but all sciences. This transformation allows us to understand the way in which a fresh attempt was made in the course of the second half of the 19th century to bring philosophy into its own. This attempt came about in the tendency to grant the particular sciences their independent right, and at the same time to secure for philosophy its own field in relation to these sciences. This leads to a philosophy which has the essential character of a theory of science, a logic of the sciences. This is the first distinctive feature of the philosophical renewal in the second half of the 19th century. The second is that the renewal takes place not in any original return to the matters at issue, but by going back to a historically established philosophy, that of Kant. Philosophy is thus traditionalistic. It assumes a well-defined complex of a well-defined line of questioning, and thus in turn comes to a well-defined position toward the concrete sciences.
I think it's worth pointing out here that when he says traditionalistic, for Heidegger, that's always not good, even though you might have him pegged as some kind of a conservative or traditionalist. It's never good when he uses the term, especially in his most philosophical period, which is during this time. So when he says it's traditionalistic, he's saying, is it really so philosophical? Right? If we've realized that the idealistic systems, and I'm assuming he means German idealism, he's talking about Fichte, Schelling, Hegel, etc. If those have failed, is going back to Kant and Kant's specific questions, which were themselves informed on the basis of certain presuppositions. Is that really the most philosophical thing that we can do? Right? And for everybody in the classroom at the time, presumably, it's not the thing to do. He's highlighting that people like Ernst Cassirer, who he's going to be debating in a few years in Davos. It's a very big time debate, very famous. It's basically phenomenology versus Neokantianism. What he's saying right here is, y'all are traditionalistic and basically not philosophical, right? Instead of doing philosophy, you're doing history of ideas. You're just trying to keep Kant alive instead of trying to get back to the matters themselves.
I didn't know that history. That's cool. What I heard here was his special concern was how they've narrowed the range of questions that are possible within philosophy.
Right.
Because I know Heidegger wants to open that up. He wants more and different types of questions to be able to emerge.
Right.
So that seemed like a big concern there.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's, if you think about Kant, he's got very specific questions, right?
It's true.
He opens up the Critique of Pure Reason talking about, free will. Is it free will, the existence of God, or the afterlife, and then something else? But it's like specifically 3 fundamental questions, he says, are the fundamental questions of philosophy. And it's like, that's actually not like the 3 fundamental questions for a lot of philosophers.
Yeah. Dude.
All right. Yeah, this is great. Yeah. Let's. I'll take a turn here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So everyone, we get to see how.
Oh boy.
How Matthew Stanley's camera work is. You can also.
How do I even see?
Because we're on these cordless mics now and not dependent on the GoPro audio, thank God. You feel free to kind of walk around and get footage of the nature and.
Here's our path.
Yeah.
Heidegger would be happy, I think.
With at least the forest path part of this, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe not the GoPro and mic part.
Don't tell Martin.
Yeah, he's rolling over in his grave. The scientific situation around the middle of the 19th century will be characterized only in terms of the main features relating to the manner and scope of the renewal of philosophical science. It is defined in all the sciences by the watchword empirical facts, as opposed to speculation and empty concepts. The prevalence of this watchword, empirical facts, has many causes. First of all, the collapse of the idealistic systems. The sciences brought their full weight to bear upon the empirical domains, and in fact, upon the 2 domains of the historical world and of nature, right? Just like what we were talking about last time, this distinction between the historical world and of nature, historical sciences and natural sciences, still alive and well with us today because the humanities and social sciences are what he's referring to as historical sciences, even then becoming disassociated from one another. On the whole, the dominant force operative in philosophical reflection at the time took the form of an arid and crude materialism, what was then called the worldview of natural science. The historiological sciences generally dispensed with any philosophical reflection. In their overall intellectual orientation, they lived in the world of Goethe and Lessing. But what alone mattered, what was decisive for them, was concrete work, and that meant the propensity toward facts. Accordingly, the first task to be carried out in history was to disclose and to secure the sources. This was accompanied by the cultivation of philological criticism, the technique of interpretation, the interpretation of the subject matter, what was then called the reading of the material given in the sources, in its methodological direction and its principles, was left to the particular mental set of the historian. The reading varied according to the impulses operative in him. These were diverse. Since the 70s, they were essentially nourished by politics. This was paralleled by a trend toward cultural history. Do we go straight?
I think so.
I'm telling you, the one big drawback with the parks out here, the signage was a little weird. So rather than worrying too much about it, we'll just kind of go in the direction that feels right. Yesterday we got a little turned around trying to follow the signs.
Yeah, the Department of Agriculture could use a little more money for their signage.
Come on, Elon, just a little bit more. They could use it.
Yeah, isn't getting lost inefficient?
Yeah, exactly. This maybe not. In nature, it could be good. It could be good.
They make the signs wrong just to force people into a situation where they have to Experience something new.
Yeah, yeah. This confluence erupted in the 80s into a discussion over whether history is cultural history or political history. No headway was made in the area of fundamentals since all the means to do so were lacking.
Wait, isn't that the battle we're having now?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think we've gotten out of it.
No.
Our resources are worse. We're less informed.
It's culture. It's class.
Yeah. Yeah, and the idea of like teaching history is very contested. A lot of people think, well, you just take a shame or pride approach to, for instance, Western or at least U.S. history. So it's Gordon Wood versus Howard Zinn, and that's the end of the story. It's that simplistic. But it indicates that the basic relationship of the historian to his objects was uncertain and was left to general considerations which were cultural and popular in nature. This condition still prevails today, even if the two are now brought together under the title of history of the spirit. Historical science is thus concentrated strictly on their concrete work, where they have accomplished important things. We were talking about how like the one fatal flaw of this hiking trip might be that we're like,
Yeah. I was like, oh, Dave's going up the hill while he's reading. I feel bad for that guy.
Yeah, I feel like I might be doing all right, but we'll see.
We can take a break. We can slow down.
It's absolutely gorgeous over here.
I know.
The sun is coming up over here. Oh my
Looking
gosh.
straight into the sun now.
Amazing. Nah, we're good. As long as you're good.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Fine.
Continue from there.
There.
Yes, sir.
I just want to say the thing I noticed about what he was saying there is, he's trying to show that philosophy has not become, philosophy is no longer very philosophical, like you were saying. It's become reliant on other disciplines and is narrowly focused on the status of particular objects, like the sources. What is a text? What does a word mean? That type of thing.
Or what's an empirical object?
Yep.
Right.
And especially that the relation it's taken towards these objects is mostly not very reflective. It's mostly just been adopted from some particular cultural, political, historical movement. And so in some way it's like, it hasn't examined these things very circumspectly. It just kind of has taken them up and is operating with them.
Yep.
The natural sciences of that time were defined by the great tradition of Galileo and Newton. Most notably, the domain of the natural sciences was expanded into the physiological and biological sphere. Thus, on the heels of the physiological, psychic life entered into the horizon of the inquiry of the natural sciences. It entered first through those areas most closely associated with the physiological, through life as it expresses itself in the sense organs. To the extent that psychic life is explored by the means of the methods of natural science, such an exploration is a psychology of the senses, sensation, and perception, and intimately associated with physiology. Psychology becomes physiological psychology, as Wundt's major work shows. Here domains were found in which even psychic life, mind, could be disclosed by the investigative means of natural science. One should also keep in mind that the task of psychology then, under the influence of British empiricism, and going back to Descartes, was conceived as a science of consciousness. In the Middle Ages and in Greek philosophy, the whole man was still seen. Inner psychic life, what we now readily call consciousness, was apprehended in a natural experience, which was not regarded as an inner perception, and so set off from an outer one. Since Descartes, the concept of psychology, in general, the science of the psychic, is altered in a characteristic manner. The science of the mental, of reason, is a science of consciousness, a science which arrives at its object in what is called inner experience. Even for physiological psychology, the approach to the theme of psychology is from the start taken for granted. Its conception was given a purely external formulation, by way of contrast. Not a science of the soul as a substance, but the psychic manifestations of that which gives itself in inner experience. That's that sentence was in italics. Characteristically, the natural sciences.
Well, it's worth dwelling on real quick. So that would be the difference between, so like the soul as maybe having its own substance, its own sort of recalcitrant nature or form is one thing. Psychology is like, no, it's like the echoes of sense impressions reverberating within the innards. You know what I mean? It's like that's psychology takes on like this much lower status. It's no longer like an attempt at a science of the soul. It's now like it's a little bit more Hume, right? It's this bundle of impressions and trying to figure out like, oh, well, what organizes them? But it is kind of just taking the outside world to be more real than the inside world. It's more durable than this inside world. But the inside world is, just a bunch of
Ironically, though, I think what he's saying
echoes.
is that the inside world is first developed as most real, and that the idea of an outside world as real is just later abstractly posited as whatever opposes itself to or is revealed in the inner life, which is, I think that's what he's saying happened, and that's very interesting.
Yeah, I think so. And ultimately he's going to, one of his big things here is he's going to want to take on just this dualistic subject-object dogma that kind of just gets taken up in this tradition, right? That's why he's saying traditionalistically, all these people are getting caught up when they're trying to go back to the basic things. They're actually just going back to Kant, or at least his fundamental questions, which are based in assumptions such as this kind of dualism.
Just to wrap up this paragraph here, characteristically, the natural sciences in their methodological import here entered into a domain which was traditionally reserved for philosophy. The tendency of a scientific psychology, also known as Freudianism, is to transpose itself into the domain of philosophy itself. Indeed, even to become, in the course of further development, the basic science of philosophy itself. Here we go.
I want to go to the top of the world.
There we go.
Right here. Is that the top of the world? Waiting 5 miles?
This is to Manuel Peak and Top of the World. They're both the same trail.
Nice.
Yeah, that's right. There's a split here. Sorry, I added my interjection about scientific psychology because Freud's first sort of unpublished treatise he pushed away in his desk was a project of a scientific psychology. That's what he set out to build.
Right.
Of course, he ended up somewhere a bit more radical than that, but it's certainly interesting that was his project.
Right, and for which he took major inspiration from the sciences of his times.
Yeah.
Right, which is, for Heidegger, going to be an issue. But also for Dilthey, it's going to be an issue.
Section A, the position of positivism. All the scientific disciplines are dominated by positivism, the tendency towards the positive, where positive is understood in terms of facts, and facts are understood in terms of a particular interpretation of reality. Facts are facts only if they can be enumerated, weighted, measured, and experimentally determined. In history, facts are those movements and events which are in the first instance accessible to the sources. Ooh, I'm gonna wait till I get to the top of this hill.
Give me a go. I want to take it first.
All right.
We'll see if I can do it. Okay, here we go. But this is quite the hill, yeah. Okay.
This is just a long hill. I was like,
Where are we at?
All right.
Positivism is to be understood not only as a maxim of concrete research, but in general. And I want to just point out, positivism could also be thought of as, what's this way? Oh, you're getting this. Okay.
Oh.
But positivism.
Nope.
Oh, that wasn't on purpose?
No, that wasn't on purpose.
For a second, I was like, oh, that's on purpose. But okay, positivism could also just be called factivism, right? And you hear it all the time. People say, well, it's just the facts. We just want to look at the facts. We just want to know facts. Of course, anyone who's done any critical theory is going to have this idea that, well, you can't just look at facts because perception is theoretically laden. This is one of the fundamental flaws of a sort of Ayn Randian objectivism, right? It's like, yeah, it can be a good way of looking at things, but also it is within a cultural and political context. You're not just looking at facts. There's a motive to the facts that are being acquired, and a lot of times the order they are put in, or at least the priorities in the research, not to mention the questions of the research. And so all that to say, whenever you hear positivism, hear factivism, because positivism, if we think of the positive, I mean, the connotation is someone running around high-fiving people, and smiling and laughing a lot.
Toxic positivity.
Yeah, not what we're talking about. In the philosophy of science and epistemology, positivism is this focus on empirical facts, which can be good as far as things go, for the reasons he already pointed out, because it says, okay, no more empty concepts, no more speculation, sort of unbounded speculation, right? And obviously that makes sense. Obviously, though, he thinks there's a way forward that is not just empty concepts and speculation, nor just the supposed accumulation of facts. And then the last thing I'll say about that, which I'll allude to, maybe we'll go into this deeper later, but positivism also cannot take into account what is not present. Not only the theories that we assume when we're going out collecting facts, but also just what's not present. Just because something's not present doesn't mean it's not real, or that it doesn't play a big role in what is present. And so there's some hubris there. All negativity and lack are necessarily bracketed out by positivism.
Did you want to sit for a sec?
No, I'm good. Actually, yeah, let's take turns on this stump since it's so
I noticed
iconic.
there was a tree. Thought that might be a decent
Oh, this is great.
spot for a little break.
Yeah, let's do that. John Stuart Mill conceives positivism philosophically as a universal theory of science. The sixth book of his system of deductive and inductive logic deals with the logic of the moral sciences, which was the old name for what we call historical science or human science. This English-French positivism soon found its way into Germany, and in the decade of the 50s, initiated reflection in the philosophy of science. Within this movement of positivism in the sciences themselves, and positivism as a philosophical theory, stands Hermann Lotz, to some extent all by himself. He kept the tradition of German idealism alive, and at the same time, tried to give the positivism of the sciences its due. He played a noteworthy transition role, not without significance, for subsequent philosophy. Section B, Neokantianism, the rediscovery of Kant in the philosophy of science. And so section A was the position of positivism, which we've just touched on. Section B, Neokantianism, the rediscovery of Kant in the philosophy of science. And then we're going to go into Dilthey, and then Dilthey's, the way that Dilthey's oversimplified by Windelband and Rickert. And remember, in the previous episode, I did say that whenever we say Rickert, what he's really saying is Weber. You know, Weber's whole approach to sociology and the historical sciences is on the shoulders of Rickert. And if that's not true, that's at least the assumption under which Heidegger himself is working. So, yeah.
I can read some.
Yeah, you want to sit on the stump? The epic stump? This might be the, well, this is,
and then the clouds covered the sun.
I know, this spot's so gorgeous. Also, I want to show people this ground cover is not something I'm used to.
I'll take the book.
I love checking out the ground covers of forests, and this one is just very different. It's very unique. I don't really know what this stuff is, and I want to find out. But see, it's everywhere.
A little micro fern.
Yeah, it looks like a micro fern. It might just be a fern, right?
Yeah. It's really dense. Like you could walk across it without ever touching the underbrush, like the needles and such. You know, like.
So, welcome to Voices. I just want to say a couple quick little things about what Voices is doing this year, 2025. So, at Theory Underground, there is a way to become involved at the gold or platinum levels, which means that you get more what Benjamin calls bespoke treatment, which is to say a kind of teaching that is dialed in to your particular interests, your particular needs. Gold and platinum subscribers get varying levels of that from Benjamin and from myself. But when you're getting it from me, what does that mean? What does that look like, right? Well, it's in part this Voices project. And that's the provisional title that I've given to this new podcast that I'm doing, for which there is both a public side and a private side. The public side to Voices is what I'm doing with the people you see here on the channel. Whereas the private side is what I'm doing with people who are gold or platinum subscribers. And the gold level gets to do one thing per month, and platinum gets to do multiple things per month. And basically, it's not where I'm just going to read and engage like with you on literally anything that you're interested in, because I just can't do that. I tried to do that in academia and it doesn't work. It has to align with my interests, because I have a very hard time focusing on things that are not immediately interesting, right? I think a lot of you ADHD brained kinds of people can probably relate to that, right? If you're deeply invested in it, you're probably able to focus on it, right? So the idea is, with Voices, communing with those voices that have a claim on us or which we would like to claim, right? And so, for instance, Neil Postman is one of those ones that we'd like to claim. We want to keep him alive. We think that he's absolutely essential to our moment, and trying to keep him around and stay in dialogue with him is something that I'm doing with Ruiz, right? It's not just, though, that these are people on my canon. It's that you, as you try to think, like, what is your canon? Like, what are the essential texts for you? If your canon overlaps with mine, if there is an overlap, then we should find like a Venn diagram. Where do we meet? And then focus in on that, right? And so if you are especially interested in any of the stuff I've ever talked about on this channel, if any of the stuff that I've ever talked about on this channel either is or might be on your canon, then this might benefit you, and it would definitely benefit me, which is why I'm doing it. I love to do this. This is a lot of fun. It's one of the most fun things you can do with other people. And I hope the fact that I have spent so much time in these various fields and that I have some degree of professional authorization to do this kind of work, as well as so much that I've done outside of the institution, I hope that that actually adds something to it for you. And so if you're interested in any of that, go ahead and become a subscriber at theoryunderground.com/subscribe and go for those higher tiers where I'm able to spend more time with you one-on-one, and we'll work through these texts. Sound good? Awesome. Thank you. Peace.
You see right here?
Yeah.
It's just complete cover. Okay, section B, Neokantianism. In the 60s, Mill's logic was known far and wide. The possibility of an investigation of the structure of the particular sciences offered the prospect of an autonomous task for philosophy, while at the same time preserving the inherent rights of the particular sciences. This task recalled Kant's critique of pure reason, which itself was interpreted as an exercise in the philosophy of science. The return to Kant, the renewal of Kantian philosophy, the founding of Neokantianism, all take place from a very particular line of questioning, that of philosophy of science. This is a narrow conception of Kant, which we only now are again trying to overcome. This reflection in the philosophy of science and the return to Kant also exposed a fundamental omission in prior philosophy of science. In considering the second major group of empirical sciences alongside the natural sciences, namely the historical disciplines, philosophy of science found itself confronted with the task of supplementing the Kantian endeavor with a critique of historical reason. This is how Dilthey formulated the problem already in the 70s. The rediscovery of Kant with a very pronounced bias towards philosophy of science was first concentrated upon a positivistic interpretation of Kantian philosophy. This work was done by Hermann Cohen, the founder of the so-called Marburg School, in his Kant's theory of experience. One can see from the title just how Kant is fundamentally regarded. Theory of experience. Experience understood as scientific experience, as it was concretely realized in mathematical physics. Thus, a theory of the positivism of the sciences emerged along Kantian lines. To be more exact, this philosophy of science is carried out as the investigation of the structure of knowledge wholly within the Kantian horizon, working out the constitutive moments of knowledge in the form of a science of consciousness. Thus, even here in the philosophy of science, there is a return to consciousness in line with the trend in psychology. Even though consciousness became a theme in scientific psychology and in epistemology in completely different ways, it nevertheless remained, and until now, has remained the tacit thematic field of consideration. It is the sphere which Descartes, in his pursuit of very particular objectives, made into the basic sphere of philosophical reflection. I feel like Heidegger's being pretty counter to our culture right now, because I feel like consciousness is the watchword. You know, even as people are attempting to extend consciousness beyond just the bounds of the individual human or the body, it's still fundamentally the question is about consciousness everywhere. And
AI itself becomes a question about consciousness.
yeah, that's true.
Which means that people think that what's important about sentience is this thing called consciousness, right?
And that's what we're trying to study. That's what everything is. That's the battleground.
Yeah.
Heidegger wants to get beyond that. He thinks that's narrow, which is interesting because a lot of people think that opens things up.
They think that's deep, yeah.
Yeah. But he thinks it's narrow.
This dirty, dusty, whatever substance is kind of reddish, sticks to the magnet.
Really?
Yeah, I put that down, and my mic has a magnet on the back of it, folks, just so you know. It's pretty spiffy. So watch, I can stick it underneath here. But yeah, no, I put it down by the ground, and it just like sucked a bunch of dirt onto it, and then I had to sit there and like try to pull it off. It doesn't just come off like a dust. It's like that. What? That's crazy.
It must have some sort of iron content.
Yeah. So
Where'd you put the GoPro?
Oh, it's in the tree.
Oh, it's in the tree.
Yeah.
I saw you fiddling with the tree, and then
Yeah, I'll take it for a spin here.
yeah, here we go. Yeah, I read one section, and these little paragraphs here are kind of short.
Nice and short sections, yeah.
He's kind of plowing through a few thinkers here.
Critique of Positivism. Dilthey's call for an independent method for the human sciences. Yeah, this one's just one paragraph, but it's a very important paragraph if you want to think about Dilthey's influence on Heidegger. So, and Dilthey is also very influential for thinking about not just philosophy of science, but also the relation between the natural sciences and the historical sciences, right? In the sixth book of his Logic, on the logic of the moral sciences, J.S. Mill sought to carry the method of the natural sciences over into the human sciences. From his early years, Dilthey saw the impossibility of such a transposition, as well as the necessity of a positive theory of the sciences drawn from the sciences themselves. He saw that the task of understanding the historical disciplines philosophically can succeed only if we reflect upon the object, the reality which is the actual theme in these sciences, and manage to lay open the basic structure of this reality, which he called life. It was in this way, from this positively novel and independently formulated task, that he came to the necessity of a psychology, a science of consciousness. But this was not to be a psychology fashioned after a natural science, nor one invested with an epistemological task. Its task is rather to regard life itself and its structures as the basic reality of history. The decisive element in Dilthey's inquiry is not the theory of the sciences of history, but the tendency to bring the reality of the historical into view and to make clear from this the manner and possibility of its interpretation. To be sure, he did not formulate the question so radically. He continued to operate in the interrogative ambience of his contemporaries, and accordingly, along with the question of the reality of the historiological sciences, he also discussed the question of the structure of knowledge itself. This line of inquiry was for a time predominant, and the text, Introduction to the Human Sciences, 1883, is essentially oriented toward a philosophy of science. And then there's one more paragraph, but this is the next section, section D, the trivializing of Dilthey's inquiry by Windelband and Rickert. The initiatives of the Marburg School and of Dilthey were then taken up by Windelband and Rickert, who leveled and trivialized them and twisted their problems beyond recognition. In other words, inquiry understood as the theoretical clarification of science is reduced by this school to an empty methodology. The structure of knowledge itself, the structure of research, of the access to the realities in question, are no longer investigated, much less the structure of these realities. The sole theme is the question of the logical structure of scientific representation. This is carried to such an extreme that in Rickert's philosophy of science and sciences this is carried to such an extreme that in Rickert's philosophy of science, these sciences under study are no longer even recognizable. More schemes of sciences are laid down and taken as basic. This distortion and trivialization had the dubious consequence of covering up the authentic meaning of Dilthey's inquiry and rendering its positive effect impotent to the present day. So a loss of focus on method in the sense that Rickert was using it, and of the structure of knowledge. Is that right? And then instead, like this sort of logical formalism, but I'm really just kind of going off of what he says here, since I obviously haven't read these guys. So, you know.
I'm sort of struggling to, like, on this point, I think we need to keep reading because I want him to contrast phenomenology with this for me, because I was going to say, it sounds like he's saying they're just looking at things and just describing their structure instead of thinking about, say, the conditions of those structures or of the alternatives or, like you said, what's absent. But if you say it that way, it actually kind of sounds like phenomenology.
It does sound like phenomenology.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I'm sort of like, okay, maybe that's not right.
Right. But also, like, that is phenomenology for most people, is like, okay, let's just try to look at things and describe them as best as we can. And that's even how, I mean, there is a lowercase p phenomenology in the sciences today that has nothing to do with Husserl or Heidegger, right? And that's what they're getting at when they say that. And if you just look up the strict meaning of the words, a study of phenomena, right? It's kind of like this open thing. You could do anything with that, as long as, we're studying phenomena. We're looking at things, is basically what that sounds like.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm excited to get into the next couple of chapters, because it is going to be a big contrast. He's going to be like, okay, but also no, it's a much more well-grounded method than that, you know? And so I don't think we get into it today, but stuff like the, I always forget the name. It's not the primordial a priori. I think it's the original sense of the a priori is one of the discoveries of phenomenology. It's very important for him. But also intentionality, right? Bracketing. These kinds of things are sort of the toolkit. But there's a couple other concepts we'll get into that I can't even remember off the top of my head, which is why I wanted to cover this. I wanted to go back over this. I have gone over it before, but it's just like coming back to it repeatedly is going to help. So one last paragraph before we continue on our way. I'll have to switch batteries out on that thing too.
Wow.
So basically, yeah, there's a distortion and trivialization that covered up Dilthey's inquiry. So the guys that were keeping him alive didn't do a very good job keeping him alive. Is kind of
Wait, were these contemporaries though?
Dilthey and
Rickard and such?
Are they
Because at one point it
contemporaneous?
says that Dilthey was near the end of his life and he was inspired by Husserl's work, which to me seems like maybe Dilthey was sort of like a generation ahead, and these guys are taking up his work. But he's not
Dilthey
dead
should
yet.
be alive right now, or he just died. He's not been gone for very long. He could have been gone for a decade maybe, but I don't think there's definitely an overlap between Dilthey and Husserl, and they both influence each other's work. But by the time Dilthey finds out about Husserl and starts reading him, he really is like towards the very end of his career. So I think he's a bit older.
Yeah.
Like he's a bit more the last generation. When I say keeping him alive, I'm saying the most popular people who reference Dilthey, that's what I mean. It's like, yeah, the way that they make him relevant is a trivialization, which is too bad. Oh, this next one's a big paragraph. All right. But the positive element in Dilthey's endeavor is its tendency toward the reality which the historiological sciences thematize. Because of this line of questioning, Dilthey holds an outstanding place within philosophy in the second half of the 19th century. Likewise, because in contrast to the Marburg school, he stayed clear of a dogmatic Kantianism, and with his proclivity for radicalism, sought to philosophize strictly out of the matters themselves. To be sure, the weight of the tradition of the philosophy of his contemporaries proved to be too powerful for him to remain true to his special bent and to keep it on a sure and steady path. He often wavered. There were times when he viewed his own work purely in terms of the traditional philosophy of his time, which was moving in a completely different direction. But time and again, the elementary instinct of his own way of questioning broke through. This insecurity indicates that he never found his own method for a true formulation of the question. At any rate, his sally into the authentic domain in the face of traditional inquiry remains decisive. This can only be appreciated if we free ourselves from the traditional standards prevalent nowadays in scientific philosophy. If we see that what is decisive in philosophy is not what characterized scientific philosophy at the end of the 19th century, namely the battle of trends and schools and the attempts to bring one standpoint to prevail over another. It is not decisive in philosophy to deal with the things once again by means of traditional concepts on the basis of an assumed traditional philosophical standpoint, but instead to disclose new domains of the matters themselves and to bring them under the jurisdiction of science by means of a productive concept formation. This is the criterion of a scientific philosophy. The criterion is not the possibility of constructing a system, a construction which is based purely on an arbitrary adaptation of the conceptual material transmitted by history. Nowadays, a tendency towards system is once again stirring in philosophy, yet it is devoid of any sense that would be dictated by an in-depth treatment of the problems. The tendency is purely traditionalistic, like the renewal of Kantian philosophy. Now, one merely goes beyond Kant to Fichte and Hegel. So, we've gone full circle. People went back to Kant because of the German idealism basically falling apart. But now people are like, okay, we've gone back to Kant. Let's go back to Hegel and Fichte now. And he's basically saying we're just in this loop. People are going to spend the rest of eternity just reading these thinkers and arguing about interpretations of these thinkers instead of trying to interrogate the matters themselves. And so he's saying Dilthey definitely took a real stab at it, but he still was caught up in his current moment. And so I always want to say, though, that I take everything Heidegger says about other thinkers with a grain of salt. It's not just Heidegger, it's really any continental philosopher. When they talk about other continental philosophers, you got to take it with a grain of salt because, this is not, there's a reason, there might be a good reason that they don't want to make this person their lifelong study, but also they just have their own thing, you know what I mean? And so the reason they give for saying, let's gloss over this person and move on is not always the whole story.
I think Heidegger is praising Dilthey and putting himself somewhat in a lineage with Dilthey as well, though, because later he's going to show that Husserl inspired Dilthey, and Dilthey saw some of what he was trying to do in Husserl's work. But also it makes me think of the first section in Gadamer's Truth and Method, where he's also getting into Dilthey and shows how Dilthey is departing from other thinkers of hermeneutics and interpretation, and how in some way Dilthey also prepared a path for his philosophy. So there's something about Dilthey where he's significant because he intuited the problem, but he wasn't brilliant enough to figure out how to articulate the problem and a response. Mm-hmm. And perhaps he was too early, like he didn't have any compatriots, or he didn't have the right influences, but he intuited the problem.
And for now, I'll just take him at his word on that. But there is the possibility that he does so much more than that. You know what I mean?
Perhaps.
It's sad because we actually can't really know. There's not a lot of translations of his work. And there's things in particular that I really want to read that I can't get my hands on. So, though there has been a rise of interest, and there's a recent book that just came out within the last 10 years that argues Heidegger's way more Diltheyan than he is Husserlian, and that being in time it can't really be understood or made sense of, like outside of the context of a Diltheyan critique of Husserl. You could also then say yes, but also Husserlian critique of Dilthey. Yeah. Well, but that's not really the move this author makes. This author just really wants to drive home the Dilthey influence. So,
well, maybe you need to get some grant money to get some people to translate some Dilthey texts.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody does. Hey, if you're in grad school looking for a cool project and you want to do some stuff in German, don't bother, with anything else. This is the thing. Do it.
TU is building a studio. I have officially cleared ground. I've been working on it for the last several months on and off, but am, as of this last week, beginning to get a lot more traction on the project because more money has come in. So thank you so much for those who have already contributed via donations for the TU studio. It's going to happen no matter what, but the question is when. If you want to help speed up the process, make things smoother sailing, and help me keep creating the kinds of content that you love, and even better, the kinds of content that is to come. There's a whole new era getting rolled out. If you want to help make it possible and usher it in smoother and faster, the best way to do that is to make a donation via the Zelle link up on the screen here. You see that QR code? Use that QR code. Once you have an account, that QR code should take you to where you can make the bank transfer with zero charge, which is really sweet, huh? Yeah, we love that. That's why we're using Zelle. Thank you so much for helping make this possible.
But we're still recording, so let's say something about being in California. So yeah, in episode 1, you would, I'd said the readings I'm doing with people, I try to do them on this series with people who are doing IRL organizing. And so we are currently here together in the midst of what I would call an organizing success on your part. And so I don't know if you want to say anything about that, but, I applaud you.
Thanks, and I'm glad that you're here. You're contributing to it and a part of it as well. So, I've been a part of Justin Murphy's Other Life community since like 2018. Kind of been in and around, and back in January 23, I did his Indie Thinkers sort of month-long creator accelerator. And
Now rebranded as Indie Scholars.
Yep.
Yeah.
Soon to come out with a new exciting product. I won't steal Justin's thunder though.
Yeah.
So that was what helped me launch as a writer on the internet. And this year, Justin's been really overwhelmed with having a second kid. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to organize something and make it happen, because then I can go to it. Instead of having to pay money to fly on an airplane, I can organize it near me. And so, I went on Airbnb and found a beautiful cabin. And I think we've got about 17 people signed up, and we've all been in this cabin together for a few days now, and went on a hike, and we've been doing some sessions. We've been having extended conversations, and then, of course, lots of conversations around meals and staying up late, and I think it's been great. I think everybody's getting inspired and asking good questions and thinking hard, and it's also good to see Justin, because I haven't seen him in a year, and to hear where he's at and his work, because I do learn from him. I've part of the reason I follow your work and Justin's and others is because I want to learn from what other people are doing, see what they're doing, why they're doing it, what works well, when they pivot, why do they pivot, because I'm like Justin, I'm interested in that kind of strategy stuff too. It's a little nerdy for me as well.
You mean you like to nerd out on the kinds of strategies, like trying to do stuff with this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do we build this space, this ecosystem, of independent scholars and alternative learning projects and that type of thing? I'm interested in the ecosystem and cultivating and tending, sort of this let 1,000 flowers bloom. And that means hitting on different strategies and thinking through different ways to build a project for financial viability, or to integrate it with your life in a different way. There's just so many ways you can go about building an independent project. And I think that being able to survey those and understand their pros and cons, then we can help other people find the right path for them as they develop their own work.
Right, and for some people that means making money doing the independent work. And that's part of how you become independent, which is what I'm doing. It's what Justin's done. It's what you're doing. Perhaps, right? You're definitely researching that right now as options go.
Yeah.
But then you've got all kinds of other people, like the people at this retreat, many of whom work day jobs, but certain types of day jobs that give them a little more flexibility to be able to do their independent, intellectual, creative, or artistic kinds of work. And so, it's very cool to be thinking about it. I know Anne's getting a lot of inspiration from it as well.
That's great.
It's fantastic. So, you want to?
All right, I'm gonna get a sip of water and we can jump back into the book.
Okay, we're almost at the top of a mountain, everybody.
Did you leave your coffee by the stump?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's some water. We'll try to remember that.
Yeah, it's even brown, so it'll blend in. When I put it there, I was like,
This could be a bad idea.
I was like, I might forget this. But I was reading, so good looking out.
All right, great. To summarize, in the middle of the 19th century, a well-defined scientific philosophy gained prevalence. The expression scientific philosophy has a threefold sense. The philosophy characterizes itself as scientific. 1, because it is a philosophy of the sciences. That is because in theory of scientific knowledge, because it has as its actual object the fact of science. 2, because by way of this inquiry into the structure of already given sciences, it secures its own theme.
There's something big moving in those bushes. We might find a bear, everybody.
Doesn't sound big enough.
Yeah, it's probably just a squirrel.
Yeah, it doesn't sound big enough. I don't hear branches snapping. Just hear leaves.
Okay. This is also cougar country, folks.
That's true.
We saw a sign yesterday that told you, don't cower, don't turn your back. If it attacks you, fight back.
Man, that's good life advice, just in general.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid. Don't turn your back. Give your troubles some trouble.
Yeah.
Because by way of this inquiry into the structure of already given science, it secures its own theme, which it investigates in accordance with its own method. While it itself no longer lapses into the domain of reflection characteristic of the particular sciences, it is scientific because it acquires its own domain and its own method. At the same time, the method maintains its security by its constant orientation to the factual conduct of the sciences themselves. Speculation aimed at worldviews is thereby avoided. 3, because it seeks to give a foundation to the various disciplines which are directed towards consciousness through an original science of consciousness itself, a psychology. Neokantianism has, it is true, launched a very strong opposition to psychology regarded as a natural science. That has not prevented the elevation of psychology to the basic science of philosophy, both by the natural sciences themselves, Helmholtz, as well as through philosophy. If knowledge is an act of consciousness, then there is a theory of knowing. Only if psychic life, consciousness, is first given and has been investigated scientifically, which means by the methods of natural science.
Amazing.
I haven't finished yet.
Okay. That was the steepest part for sure.
It should be noted that psychology today, with its various directions, is on a completely different level from this natural scientific psychology. Under the essential influence of phenomenological work, the manner of inquiry in psychology has been altered. At the end of the 19th century, scientific philosophy, in all of its directions, was pervaded by the theme of consciousness, has an explicit awareness of its connection with Descartes, who was the first to identify consciousness, res cogitans, as the basic theme of philosophy. It's difficult to see through this philosophy of the turn of the century to all of its particulars. This is not the place to pursue the particular connections. It is irrelevant for our inquiry. Let us note only that since 1840, an Aristotelian tradition has been an active force within this movement. It was founded by Trendelenburg. It arose from the opposition to Hegel and began as a way of assimilating the historical research by Schleiermacher and Bock into the field of Greek philosophy. Dilthey and Brentano are students of Trendelenburg.
And what did he just say about Trendelenburg, or whatever his name is? He's saying Dilthey's a student of his. Yeah, 0.3 miles this way.
Oh, okay. Sweet.
0.3 miles to the top of the world. For
Who knew
anybody
it was
who's ever
so
wondered
easy?
where the top of the world is, we're going to show you. The top of the whole earth.
He says that Trendelenburg is a representative of this Aristotelian tradition that persisted, and it was born as a critique of Hegel, an attempt to use Schleiermacher and Boch in the study of Greek philosophy.
Okay, sweet. And Heidegger thinks you should read a lot of Aristotle. That could be part of the reason, who knows? Well, we're coming out over the top here of something. It looks like we just go down and up and then we're there. We'll hang out for 10 minutes and head back.
Yeah.
It'll probably be a lot shorter going back than
Yeah,
getting
we'll need
here.
to move a little more quickly.
Yeah, we'll have to
be back for breakfast.
We'll be speed walking while reading.
This right here.
And we'll also be, 2x reading. So we'll walk faster, but we'll have to read at 2x speed so to make it match, so people don't get confused.
What if we walked half as slow and read at a normal pace and you just double the speed of the footage?
There we go. Well, we just won't get home on time. Yeah, because there's just going to be a breakfast and everybody's going to be up and they're all going to be like, where were you guys? And we'll be like, we lost my coffee cup. We have to go looking for it.
We'll both look at each other. Oh no, the coffee cup.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up right now, so I hopefully don't forget, you know.
Along the way, the listeners are going to be like, did they grab the coffee cup?
Did they get the coffee
Did they
cup?
get the coffee cup? I got to read. I got to watch to the end.
If for people who only like traditional reading and they don't like any other form of getting books, this is all very frivolous. But for people who like getting books in all kinds of experimental ways, in any which way they possibly can, I hope that you're all getting a kick from this. It's an experiment. I'm happy. We're getting more from reading while walking than I thought we could, even though, I have read while walking around various places while traveling, and I just do it by myself, and it's in my head, and and I'm not the only one. I was doing it in Paris, and I passed someone else who was doing it, and I was like, and I did not stop and say, hey, what are you reading?
I'm sure they would have loved that.
I fucking hate that shit. I was walking while reading just 3 days ago in the Tillamook, and this guy says, what are you reading? And I'm out camping in the middle of nowhere. He's like, what are you reading? And I was like, oh, here we go. Whoa.
Got a little window through the manzanita. Yeah.
Whoa.
There's some clips you see kind of cut out of the rocks over there.
Oh, wow.
And this is only, we're probably only at like 4,000 feet here.
Oh my God. This is what we were looking for yesterday. It was a lookout spot like that. Instead, we were like down in the woods.
Yeah.
We only kind of got a view with the drone, and it's just, we didn't see anything like that. That's incredible.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into Brentano. I'll read a little more.
Okay.
Franz Brentano was a student in Berlin at the end of the 1860s, where he first studied Catholic theology. His first work was on Aristotle, and he sought to interpret Aristotle against the horizon of medieval philosophy, above all that of Thomas Aquinas. Such an interpretation is the distinguishing mark of his work, which is not to say that this is really the way to understand Aristotle. On the contrary, through this kind of interpretation, Aristotle essentially undergoes a drastic reinterpretation. But that is not the crucial issue. What is important is that Brentano himself, through his preoccupation with Greek philosophy, arrived at some more original horizon for his philosophical inquiry. Personal difficulties with Catholic belief, in particular the mystery of the Trinity, and in the 70s, the declaration of the infallibility of the Pope, forced him to leave this intellectual world. But he took with him some well-defined horizons and a reverence for Aristotle, and now moved into the current of a free and unrestricted philosophical science. The way out of this tradition was traced for him by Descartes. Brentano's work thus reveals a unique blend of Aristotelian scholastic philosophizing and a modern Cartesian inquiry. He makes the philosophical goal of a science of consciousness his own, but the decisive move is to be found in Brentano's Psychology from the Empirical Standpoint, 1874. Here, for the first time, he detaches himself from the tendency to transpose the methods of natural science and physiology into the explorations of psychic life. Characteristic for the direction of his thought is the thesis of his inaugural dissertation, vera methodis philosophiae non alia est nisi scientiae naturalis. The true philosophical method is none other than that of the natural sciences. It would be wrong to interpret this thesis as a call to transpose the methods of natural science into philosophy. The thesis rather means that philosophy has to proceed in its field exactly as the natural sciences do in theirs. Namely, it has to draw its concept from its own matters. This thesis is not a proclamation in favor of a brute transfer of scientific methodology into philosophy, but the opposite. The exclusion of the methodology of natural science and the call to proceed in philosophy as the natural sciences do in their own field, with a fundamental regard for the character of the subject matters in question. Oh man, this is great.
That's good. Yeah. That last paragraph bears rereading. I'm not going to do it, but everyone is encouraged to go look at it for themselves. Anna's Archive is your friend in that regard. Get the PDF.
Didn't hear it from us.
Yeah. What is he saying? He's saying that Brentano renews the project for a scientific philosophy, but that this means the opposite of what it means for a lot of people doing what we would call scientism. Because he's saying the genuinely scientific thing, Husserl will call it an attitude, is one that says, regarding this subject matter that opens this field of research, we will not borrow our concepts from other fields that were opened up by other subject matters. Every field to become a proper field is only established once it says, okay, we're just going to develop concepts on the basis of an interrogation of this subject matter and its objects, not borrowing willy-nilly and copy-pasting concepts from other fields. So Brentano's very influential on Husserl, and then of course through him Heidegger, for basically giving scientific philosophy this new meaning. Are we right here?
No, right here.
For the task of a psychology, this means that prior to all theories about the connection of the psychic with the bodily or of sense life with the sense organs, what really matters first is to accept the actual elements of psychic life as they are immediately accessible. The first and foremost task is a classification of psychic phenomena, a division of psychic phenomena, not on the basis of an arbitrary principle imposed from without, but a division and order which follows the nature of the psychic, an order which would include the formation of basic concepts drawn from the essence of the matters being considered here, from the essence of the psychic itself. Brentano thus tried to provide the foundations for the science of consciousness, of lived experiences, of the psychic in the broadest sense by accepting the actual elements just as they are given in this field. He did not begin with theories about the psychic, about the soul itself, about the connection of the psychic with the physiological and biological. Instead, he first clarified what it is that is given when one speaks of the psychic, of lived experiences. His major work, Psychology of the Empirical Standpoint, is divided into two books. The first book discusses psychology as a science, and the second addresses psychic phenomena in general. Empirical here does not mean inductive in the sense given to it by the natural sciences, but rather drawn from the subject matter without constructions. The first thing, therefore, is to characterize the psychic phenomena themselves, to order their multiplicity according to basic structures, hence the task of a classification. Classification means dividing and ordering actual elements which are already given. Ordering, so this is classification in a non-speculative, arbitrary, willy-nilly way, but a rigorous, serious classification for Brentano would mean working with what's given, right? Ordering is always done from a point of view, as everyone says. Point of view is the toward which I look, with regard to which I make certain distinctions in a domain of subject matter. This regard or point of view can vary in kind. I can order a given manifold of objects with regard to a devised scheme. I can imagine that there are very general processes which run from within to without, and others which proceed from without to within, and order the psychic phenomena from this point of view. Second, the point of view can be taken from the objective context which bears a connection with that which is itself to be ordered, in the manner that I order psychic processes with regard to physiological relationships. The attempt was accordingly made to define even thinking and willing in terms of phenomena of neural kinetics. Third, the point of view can itself be drawn from the actual elements to be ordered. No principle is superimposed upon them. It is rather drawn from the actual elements themselves. This is the real maxim which Brentano follows in his classification. Quote, "The order of lived experiences must be natural. An experience must be assigned to a class to which it belongs in accordance with its nature." Nature here means that which is what it is, as seen from itself. When it is genuine, a classification can be made only from, quote, "a prior familiarity with the objects," from the study of the objects. I must have prior familiarity with the objects, their basic structures, if I am to order them properly, in accord with the subject matter or object. The question therefore arises, what is the nature of psychic phenomena compared with the physical? This is the question posed by Brentano in the first book on psychology. He says that psychic phenomena differ from all physical phenomena by nothing so much as by the indwelling in them of something objective. Accordingly, if there are to be distinctions within the field of psychic phenomena, they must be distinctions with respect to the basic structure of this indwelling. Distinctions in the way in which something is objective in these lived experiences. These differences in how something is objective in the various lived experiences. I'm going to finish this paragraph, hand it to you. I'll set that GoPro up over there. I'm going to fly the drone for like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And then we'll bounce
Yeah, it'd be great.
Because we were talking, we're not going to just walk and read at the same time. We're also going to get drone footage of us reading. Yeah. So, because come on, look at this area, guys.
Look at this cloud right here. It's like right there where it's like super dark and it comes to like a little plateau there.
Mm-hmm. Like at Thanksgiving, what do they call it? A cornicon or like, you know what? A
cornucopia.
Cornucopia. It looks like a cornucopia up there. A cornicon. That sounds like a band.
Hey, come to Cornicon, man. It's gonna be great this year.
We're gonna be at Cornicon. These differences in how something is objective in the various lived experiences, the represented in representing, the judged in judging, the willed in willing, accordingly form the principal distinctions of classes among the psychic phenomena. This basic structure of the psychic, whereby something objective inheres in each lived experience, is called intentional inexistence by Brentano. So now we're going to get into what Brentano does to make intentionality relevant to Husserl.
All right. You gonna? I'll read in while you set up the camera. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Husserl himself was originally a mathematician. Oh, I'm totally reading the wrong section. Intentio is a scholastic expression which means directing itself toward. Brentano speaks of the intentional inexistence of the object. Each lived experience directs itself towards something in a way which varies according to the distinctive character of the experience. To represent something after the manner of representing is a different self-directing than to judge something after the manner of judging. Brentano expressly emphasizes that Aristotle already made this point of view the basis for his treatment of psychic phenomena, and that the scholastics took over this phenomenon of intentionality. Regarding this basic structure of psychic phenomena, Brentano divides the various ways of self-directedness toward their particular object into three basic classes of psychic comportment: representation, judgment, and interest. We speak of a representing wherever something appears, wherever something is simply given, and the simply given is perceived. Representing, in the broadest sense, is the simple having of something. Brentano interprets judging as an accepting as true or a rejecting as false. In contrast to merely having something, judging is taking a definite position toward the represented as represented. Brentano designates the third class with different titles: interest, love, emotion. This class for us shall include all psychic appearances which are not contained in the first two classes. He emphasizes that a proper expression for these acts of taking an interest in something is lacking. It was later also called valuing, or better yet, worth-taking. Using this basic division of psychic experience as a guide, Brentano seeks to exhibit the basic structure of representing, judging, and emotions. Regarding the relationship of these phenomena, Brentano laid down the following basic thesis, and this is in italics. Every psychic phenomenon is itself either a representation or is based upon representations. This representing forms the basis of judgment, just as it does of desiring and every other psychic act. Nothing can be judged, but also nothing can be desired, nothing can be hoped or feared if it is not represented. Hence, the simple having of something assumes the function of a basic comportment. Judging and taking an interest are possible only if something is represented, which gets judged, in which an interest is taken. Brentano operates not only in mere description, but tries to set off this division from the traditional one in a critical examination which we will not pursue any further. Thus, a completely new movement was initiated in psychology and philosophy, a movement which already had an effect upon the American psychology of that time, upon William James, who gained influence in Germany and all of Europe, and from James back upon Henri Bergson, whose theory of the immediate data of consciousness accordingly goes back to the ideas of Brentano's psychology. His idea of a descriptive psychology had a profound impact upon Dilthey. In his Academy essay of 1894, Ideas Toward a Descriptive and Analytic Psychology, Dilthey sought to make such a psychology the basic science among the human sciences. The truly decisive aspect of the development of Brentano's way of questioning is to be seen in the fact that Brentano became the teacher of Husserl, the subsequent founder of phenomenological research. Husserl himself was originally a mathematician. He was a student of Weierstrass and wrote a mathematical dissertation for his degree. What he heard of philosophy did not go beyond what any student picked up in the lecture courses. What Paulson said was reliable and clear, but nothing apt to inspire Husserl to regard philosophy as a scientific discipline. It was only after he graduated that Husserl attended the courses of the man who was then much discussed. Brentano's passion for questioning and reflection impressed Husserl so strongly that he remained with Brentano for 2 years, from 1884 to 1886. Brentano provided the decisive turn to the scientific direction which Husserl's work was to take. His wavering between mathematics and philosophy was resolved. Through the impression which Brentano as teacher and researcher made upon him, Husserl espied, within the unproductive philosophies of the time, the possibility of a scientific philosophy. Characteristically, Husserl's philosophical efforts did not begin with some contrived and far-fetched problem. Rather, in accord with the course of his own scientific development, he began to philosophize upon the foundation which he already had. Accordingly, his philosophical reflection, now guided by Brentano's methodology, turned towards mathematics. At first, he was concerned with what was traditionally called the logic of mathematics. For Husserl, this meant not only the theory of mathematical thought and knowledge. The first theme of his reflection was the analysis of the structure of the objects of mathematics, number. A work on the concept of number, written under Stumpf, Brentano's very first student in Halle at the end of the 80s, qualified Husserl as an academic lecturer. This work, understood as an actual investigation of the matters at issue, became possible under the basis provided by Brentano's descriptive psychology. But soon Husserl's questioning extended into matters of principle, and his investigations advanced to the fundamental concepts of thinking as such, and of objects in general. It grew into the problem of a scientific logic, in close conjunction with reflection upon the methodological ways and means for the correct exploration of the objects of logic. This meant a more radical conception of what was already advanced in Brentano's descriptive psychology, as well as a basic critique of the contemporaries' confusion of psychological genetic inquiry with logical inquiry. This work on the fundamental objects of logic occupied Husserl for more than 12 years. The initial results of this effort formed the content of the work, which appeared in 2 volumes in 1900 and 1901 under the title Logical Investigations. This work marks the initial breakthrough of phenomenological research. It has become the basic book of phenomenology. The personal history of its origin is a story of continual despair, and it does not belong here.
Yeah.
What a funny line. This book kicked Husserl's ass, but we're not going to talk about that here.
That's literally what he just said. Yeah, he's like this book's a fucking mess, man, but it's dope.
Yep.
You know, it is a real slog.
It's rough. I've only read excerpts in a phenomenology seminar I took in college, and Husserl is rough going, man.
Yeah, he is. All right, I'll take it for a spin.
Where's your drone at?
Somewhere up in the sky.
I'm not quite seeing it.
Oh, you want to see? You see yourself from it?
Oh, man.
Okay, where are we?
Here you go. The first 2 immediately.
Okay. So
I don't really want to control your drone.
Well, you're totally fine to, as long as you stay that height. So just don't go up or down with this one.
Okay.
And then with that said, all you got to do is like you can strafe left and right with this one.
Okay.
Which is kind of like zzz, zzz, right?
Oh,
and then
okay.
you can look around with this one, and then you put your finger up on this, on that, and then that's how you look up and down. You can do all that. Look up and down, strafe, look around.
This is up and no, that's record.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's we're already recording. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay. Changing the angle.
If it's going to distract you too much, don't worry about it, but also just kind of treat it like a video game.
Yeah.
As long as you stay at that height, you're not going to hit trees because we're at the top of the world. You know,
Yep.
So it couldn't be any better than that. All right. The first to immediately recognize the central significance of these investigations was Dilthey. He described them as the first great scientific advance in philosophy since Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. Dilthey was 70 years old when he became acquainted with Husserl's logical investigations. Yeah, see, he was 70 years old. Yeah. An age at which others have long since become secure and complacent in their systems. Dilthey immediately embarked upon the semester-long studies of the book within a circle of his closest students. To be sure, an inner kinship with its basic direction made it easier for Dilthey to see the significance of this book. In a letter to Husserl, he compared their work to boring into a mountain from opposite sides until they break through and meet each other. Dilthey here found an initial fulfillment of what he had sought for decades and formulated as a critical program in the Academy essay of 1894, A Fundamental Science of Life Itself. The book also influenced Lipps and his students in Munich, but here logical investigations was regarded simply as an improved descriptive psychology. The Marburg School took a characteristic position. In an extensive review, Natorp praised only the first volume, which included a critique of the logic of the time and showed that that logic cannot be grounded in psychology. He observes that the Marburgers did not have all that much to learn from this work. What it has to say they had already discovered for themselves. The second volume, which contains the decisive elements, was not examined. Okay, so for Heidegger, the decisive elements of Husserl's phenomenology are in the second volume. Everybody receives this first volume and are like, oh, we've reached similar conclusions by other means, and so we don't need this, right? But in short, what that's basically saying is that volume 1 of the Logical Investigations is about a critique of the logic of the time. And specifically, what an attempt to ground mathematics in logic. Wait, is that what it was? Which included a critique. Showed that logic cannot be grounded in psychology. Sorry, yeah. There is only the blanket assertion that the second volume is a relapse into psychology, whose transference into philosophy had been explicitly rejected by Husserl in the first volume. This misunderstanding is due to some extent to the self-interpretation which Husserl himself gives in the introduction to this volume. Phenomenology is descriptive psychology. This self-interpretation of his own work is quite incongruous with what is elaborated in it. In other words, when he wrote the introduction to these investigations, Husserl was not in a position to survey properly what he had actually presented in this volume. 2 years later, he himself corrected this mistaken interpretation in the journal, which is something like Archiv für Systematische Philosophie, 1903. All you need to know about what he's saying here is that this is not about a psychology, and that Husserl's breakthroughs show that. But there was a brief time where Husserl liked the ring of that term, and so he was embracing the idea that it was a kind of psychology until he realized better. It's not really. These logical investigations, as fundamental as they are, do not bring us any in-depth knowledge for the mastery of emotional needs and the like. Rather, they deal with very special and arid problems, with object, concept, truth, proposition, fact, law. The subtitle of the positive second volume is Investigations into the Phenomenology and Theory of Knowledge. It includes 6 extensive special investigations whose connection is not immediately clear. And then I think we'll just kind of send it home now, if you're ready. Are you having fun?
Yeah, I found us and zoomed in.
Oh, you zoomed in?
Just a little bit.
Nice. Are you doing it with the touchscreen?
I just went in and out.
Nice. Yeah, there's also this thing here. You can do it a little bit more controlled way sometimes, but...
Okay, so people don't get sick.
Yeah, were you?
I don't know.
Okay, yeah, I love that view right there, though. Damn. And then watch this. You just hit home. Return to home.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. But I'll just kind of have to babysit and make sure it lands in a straight line. If it's coming down a little to the side, it'll come down on the briefcase. So if you'll just take it from right here. It includes 6, so he's going through. Maybe go back a sentence before that.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. That's fascinating. All right. These logical investigations are, as fundamental as they are, do not bring us any in-depth knowledge for the mastery of emotional needs and the like. Rather, they deal with very special and arid problems, with object, concept, truth, proposition, fact, law. The subtitle of the positive second volume is Investigations into the Phenomenology and Theory of Knowledge. It includes 6 extensive special investigations whose connection is not immediately clear. 1. Expression and meaning. 2. The ideal unity of species and the more recent theories of abstraction. 3. On the doctrine of wholes and parts. 4. The distinction between independent and dependent meanings and the idea of pure grammar. 5. On intentional experiences and their contents. 6. elements of a phenomenological elucidation of knowledge. These are unusual themes for a logic and theory of knowledge. The choice of the subtitle Theory of Knowledge came about solely in deference to the tradition. The introduction states that, strictly speaking, theory of knowledge is not theory at all, but a reflection which comes to an evident understanding of what thinking and knowing as such are in their generically pure essence. Calling it a theory is still a covert form of naturalism, for which any theory is a deductive system whose goal is to explain given facts. Husserl expressly rejects this customary sense of a theory of knowledge. Even more unusual than the subject matter and totally contrary to the customary way of philosophizing is the kind of penetration and appropriation which the work demands. It proceeds in a thoroughgoing investigative fashion. It calls for a step-by-step, expressly intuitive envisaging of the matters at issue and a verifying demonstration of them. Accordingly, one cannot, without subverting the entire sense of the investigations, simply pull out results and integrate them into a system. Rather, the whole thrust of the work serves to implicate the reader into pressing further and working through the matters under investigation. If the impact of the work were compared to what it demands of us, then it would have to be said that its impact has been minimal and superficial, in spite of the major revolutions initiated by it in the last 2 decades. Final paragraph of the chapter. It is of the essence of phenomenological investigations that they cannot be reviewed summarily, but must in each case be rehearsed and repeated anew. Any further synopsis which merely summarizes the contents of this work would thus be, phenomenologically speaking, a misunderstanding. We shall therefore try an alternate route by providing an initial orientation concerning what is actually accomplished here. This will also serve as an initial preparation and elaboration of the working attitude, which we shall assume throughout this lecture course.
Now, as I pack up, and one of the nice things about this is basically we can kind of wrap up this episode here in the next 10 minutes, and then we'll be able to kind of jog our way back to the car. And that way we should make pretty good time, and we won't have to worry about breathing heavily, though we will have to worry about remembering
to grab the coffee cup.
The coffee cup. Yeah, exactly. So if you want to grab the GoPro from that tree there, while we do this, I wanted to say that last, maybe as a bookmark for myself, but that last paragraph, he says it goes against the nature of this kind of research to just summarize it. You can't just summarize it. Now, though they're not Hegelian, and this kind of phenomenology as a very specific approach is not what Hegel is doing with the phenomenology of spirit. Hegel would say the same thing in his preface. So there was this big desire on the part of people doing something called phenomenology, which Husserl and Heidegger are trying to make into a much more secure method to say it's a thing you have to do yourself. It's not something that can be given to you as a set of conclusions. It's not something to be summarized and then repeated dogmatically. And one of the interesting things about that is that Heideggerians and Husserlians, but mostly Heideggerians, there's not a lot of Husserlians, at least that, they're not a prominent presence in the theory scene, right? But their approach is approaching, it's text-based. They're traditionalistic in the way that Heidegger is critiquing the prominent Neokantian philosophy of his time, which is to say, well, what does Heidegger think about this? Oh, what does Heidegger think about this? Well, what did he say in this book? What's his conclusion here? What's his conclusion there? And I'm not saying, he is saying there's no point reading them. You have to still read them, because otherwise you don't realize how much of what they were thinking you might just take for granted, right? We are to discover kind of like what the waters are that we are swimming in. It does require this kind of history of ideas approach. And it's not a waste of time for it to have people who spend their whole life just asking that question. Well, what did Hegel really think? What did Heidegger really think? And so it's not fruitless, but for us, or at least for me, I'll say at least for me, my goal is not to be thought of as a great Heidegger scholar, or my goal is not to get a job in academia where I'm going to be like Hubert Dreyfus, bless his heart, love him, spend the rest of my life teaching Being in Time, right? I do want to teach Being in Time. I do want to read Being in Time, but the point is not to have like these forever conversations of, did he say that? Did he really say that? So-and-so says he says this. The point is like to engage these kinds of texts, to get outside of ourselves a little bit, or kind of realize what kind of water we are swimming in, seeing which ways it might relate to our life, as you were alluding to, with the way that we're still in this sort of like consciousness game, right? But at the end of the day, what are we actually doing, you know? And I think the inspiration for me from all of this is the idea of the method is, yeah, you want tools for your toolkit, and then you want to think about life deeply. Like, that's what we're here to do. And you don't have to be a lifelong scholar of any one thinker, or have a take on every thinker in the history of philosophy in order to think deeply about your own life, your own relationships to the world, etc. And so I don't know. And I think Heidegger would agree. I think Jaspers would agree. I think any existential kind of disposed type of thinker would also agree. And so, I don't know, to me, it's important just to remind people, since we are reading these books, it's easy to then start worshiping the books. And especially when they're kind of profound and we get a lot out of them and they blow our minds. They leave a huge impact on us, and then we just want to keep going back over them. I think we should, and that's kind of the point of Voices, but also, to what end? You know, and that's kind of the question I wanted to raise here. And so I'm interested in your thoughts about it, because I think it even relates to some of the stuff that's come up here at this retreat.
Yeah, I think that there's a sense in which I'm still a little too married to like these particular thinkers and texts, and tend to express my ideas through them, or view my research as an investigation into their thought. And I've thought about that. I've struggled with it. I was like, is this just sort of like an attachment to particular objects that maybe I'd be better served by loosening that attachment? Like, is it restraining me and my ability to think? Is it even a way of is it a form of idle chatter that covers over my own internal investigation into the state of my life and my heart? And one thing that I have realized, I haven't answered that question yet for myself. One thing I have realized, though, is that being a part of the story is motivating to me. Being a part of a conversation that started in the past, and the conversation is a window into particular people's lives too. Like, I mean, I'm not just interested in what did Foucault think,
right?
You know, but why did Foucault come to think what he did? You know,
right.
And what does his struggle with thought? What does it express about his life, his family, his time, his questions? And I think that what I've realized is that I think the investigation into certain philosophical systems has become for me a way of probing the philosopher behind the system, of probing their story and their struggles and their feelings, and a way of getting to know them.
Right.
Almost a form of friendship and of mutual support. So that's one thing I've begun to take away, even as I do think it's important to broaden our thinking horizons and not be so trapped in any particular school or system, and or getting caught up in these debates about what did so and so mean, and oh, here's the school of X and I'm the school of Y and blah blah blah. Those debates are valuable, insofar as they clarify your own intuitions about what you really think, or reveal failures that you need to adapt to in your thinking.
Right.
But they ultimately will hold you back if that's where you stay. If you stay in the he said, she said, they say, I say
Right.
type of undergraduate essay writing thinking,
Yeah.
but you just amp it way up to the level of high-class scholarship.
Right.
The key is to get into stories, I think. And getting into stories is a way of helping to get into your own story.
Yeah, and this seems related to Alistair McIntyre and what he says in After Virtue. To people teaching philosophy and studying it at the university, it doesn't matter that Adam Smith is Scottish. You know? And I think Heidegger's a really great way of thinking about McIntyre, whereas McIntyre's not a great way of thinking about Heidegger, because Heidegger only comes up a few times, and each way he's dismissed for something that I don't think is fair throughout After Virtue. But I think McIntyre had to set himself apart at the time. We have to, in the same way that he's saying you gotta think about these people in their world, what were they dealing with at that time? I think McIntyre had a good reason to try to do what he was doing without any help from Heidegger. But I can say Heidegger would love that opening thought experiment at the beginning of After Virtue, where he's talking about what if this big anti-science movement came up and destroyed all of the institutions of science, and then there was a renaissance later on by people who really wanted to be scientific, but they were lacking those institutions, and all they had were like artifacts, like the periodic table or something like that. And then they basically would memorize and study these artifacts, but they're lacking the broader context, understanding, method, and institutions for these artifacts. And then McIntyre's like, well, this is actually what happened with the classical virtues, folks. So, you know, and they've been studied in this way that completely misses the point. Not only that, analytic philosophy on the one side and phenomenology on the other side are both fundamentally incapable of getting at what we need to get at here. And I would just say that I think Heidegger agrees 100%, which is part of why he leaves phenomenology as it was practiced. And so what we've just covered here, bringing it all back around, this is his lecture where he is giving people this sort of story about where he sees Husserl's intervention, his predecessors, what is it that he's doing? And that's also a part of telling his own story.
Yep.
What is it that I'm doing? And so in order to really lay out what he is setting himself to do in this lecture series, he's got to first, you know, give honor where it's due, give credit where it's due, and then he's going to go into some original research. But before he gets into his original research, now we're going to spend a couple of chapters going deeper into Husserl. And I think that one of the best things about this book, just like one of the things that makes it worth reading on its own, or even just the next two chapters on their own, is that you won't get a more succinct, not summary, because he's against doing a summary here, but a sort of a treatment of Husserl where he's basically saying, look, this is a discovery, this is a discovery, this is a discovery. These discoveries constitute essential tools in my kit. Now let's get to work. And now he's going to apply those tools through the rest of the book. But the thing is the ways that he applies them, he's going to go beyond Husserl in all kinds of ways because he's got a different drive. He's got a different set of interests. And so the way that he'll take up those tools is very different. Yeah.
I think it's fascinating to call a philosophical insight a discovery. You know?
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel like we're inclined to think that way. We think like, oh, this is just some idea I happen upon. You know, like maybe somebody else has thought it before, you know, like it's not maybe it feels novel to me, but I would not describe it as a discovery.
Yeah.
I don't know why, though. I'd have to think about it. I feel like a scientific discovery is like a demonstration of something fundamentally new. But that doesn't, I guess, you know, when you say it out loud, it's not inherently incompatible with a philosophical insight, you know?
Yeah, I think the word insight, so in the way that discovery might overblow it, I think that insight might undersell it, right? So maybe there's a better term in general. Yeah, I think Heidegger prefers disclose. So, you know, if you set up the ground of an investigation properly, you can disclose something.
Yeah.
Which is to say, shine a light on something. You know, you can bring it into focus, and he'll use various ways of kind of saying, you know, that throughout his career. But the term discovery might be in the spirit of this idea of a scientific philosophy. He's saying, well, we're trying to have the attitude of a science, which doesn't mean we're going to ape the sciences. We're going to have that sort of serious attitude, though, that says back to the matters themselves. Our concepts will come out of the subject matter and not be transplanted from alien terrain. Because he's kind of honoring his mentor, I think he wants to call it a discovery. But I really think, he'll move into disclosure as his principle. It's not just a metaphor, right? But like that is like kind of what he sees himself as doing and being in time, you know. And actually, he wants to uncover the grounds of disclosure, which is something I talked a little bit about in the Being in the World things I did this year. So. But good point though, because insight, people are like, oh, that's a cool insight. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so like that's where the cheapening can come in. But if you realize that insight is not actually this cheap thing, and that it can actually give you like there are deep or profound insights. Once you realize that, then it's like, well, then no, that can be a great way of talking about it.
Well, and this is a perfect place to wrap up the episode because now we can get the coffee cup.
For everybody who is waiting with bated breath to see, I know
it's gone. No, I'm just
every stump we walked past, I was like, "Is it there? Is it there?" And I was like, "No, those stumps aren't nearly as nice as this stump."
Thank you, stump.
With my TU sticker as well as my deli paid sticker, and people who
At least we know we paid for it.
Yeah, people who know about Super One Foods in Athol, Idaho, always joke that I just leave that on there so I can get infinite refills. Every time I go in the store, I just refill it, and then I go, oh, it's deli paid. Yeah. I paid for it. Anyway, everybody, I hope that this inspires you to go read something, get out in nature, organize something, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye, everybody. Hit this button right here.
That's 3 great things to be inspired to go do.
Yeah, seriously.
Subscribers get access to all past courses at Theory Underground, as well as ongoing courses taught by David McKerracher, Benjamin Studebaker, and Nina Power. Subscribers also get access to monthly research seminars, and the higher tiers of involvement unlock discussions and one-on-one small group tutelage. So if you're like me and you're never a huge bookish kind of person, but somewhere along the way you got really into listening to educational materials, if you got really into listening to podcasts and then books at work, if you love going deep into ideas, but you're just not a traditional bookish kind of person, well, this is where the alliance between people like us and people who are more bookish and specialized are able to meet to work through these things and do so in defense of the human, in defense of our dignity, in defense of our common humanity and our intellectual integrity. This is not a place where we're going to kick you out because you're pro-life or pro-choice, or where you are an atheist or a agnostic or a Christian. But it is a place where you're expected to love one another regardless of such things, and to show up for people in your actual IRL real life communities regardless of such things. And if that is exciting for you, and if you're excited to learn about what this approach, this method, this school of thought has to offer, then I'm excited to meet you. Subscribe today.